Hey everybody, welcome to the Friday News Lunch from the Bucks County Beacon. I'm KEVIN Mahoney.
And I'm Cyril Mychalejko.
And each week we'll serve up the week's top stories affecting our communities and the nation. We hope you join us live every Friday at noon on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or right on the Beacon's website at thebuckscountybeacon.com. And look, if anything could not be clearer, we're going to need independent, community-supported progressive media in the weeks, months, and years ahead. There could not be a better time to take a moment to head on over to thebuckscountybeacon.com and click on the Support the Beacon button to become a supporter. You can become a monthly supporter for as little as $1 a month. $1 a month. You can become a regular supporter for $5 a month or a yearly supporter for as little as $50 a year. Come on, everybody. Hop on the Beacon train. You can even drop a one-time donation to help keep the Beacon's critical lens focused and sustainable. Just head on over to buckscountybeacon.com and hit that Support the Beacon button. And if you haven't already, you should check out the Signal podcast from the Bucks County Beacon. The latest episode features Cyril's interview with Dr. Anita Varma on solidarity journalism. It was an awesome interview that left me feeling hopeful for the first time in a while. I keep on telling people about this interview, and I'm like, you know what? I walked away from that interview saying, all right, we can do this. It's going to take some time, but we can do this. It was a great interview. Do check it out. You can check it wherever you get your podcast or go directly to the Beacon's website for all the info. Let's see what's on the menu this week, shall we? Well, obviously, I didn't even put this in the show notes because I want to duck my head in the sand. But, yep, Inauguration Day is coming up, everybody. Good thing it's going to be butt cold in D.C. Well, today, the Supreme Court unanimously upheld the law banning TikTok if it's not sold by its Chinese parent company. My kids are all in an uproar on this one. It's an unsigned opinion, and it's unsigned opinion, sorry. The justices wrote, quote, Congress has determined that divestiture is necessary to address its well-supported national security concerns regarding TikTok's data collection practices and relationship with a foreign adversary. And the law, quote, does not violate petitioners' First Amendment rights, according to the Supreme Court. Now, Kate Ruan, director of the Center for Democracy and Technology, which supported TikTok's challenge to the federal law, said, quote, today's unprecedented decision upholding the TikTok ban harms the free expression of hundreds of millions of TikTok users in this country and around the world. We'll talk a little about that. And we've got a ceasefire in Israel and Gaza, apparently. The last vote will take place today. Will this hold? We shall see, as the more folks in Gaza were killed by Israeli airstrikes, including children, after the ceasefire was announced. And the Trump train continues to roll as all its nominations, including accused sex offenders and unqualified cronies, appear ready to be approved by the Republican-controlled Congress. Up today, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, known for her anti-immigrant, anti-mask, anti-trans extremism, has her hearing today to become the next director of Homeland Security. And I tuned in for a little bit here to look at all the smiles and as the questions were coming from the Democrats. Biden reached for an FDR moment in his farewell address this week, warning of an oligarchy taking root in the country led by a tech industrial complex. Where you been, Joe? Where you been? And tomorrow, Saturday, January 18th at 12 noon, there will be a People's March at the Montgomery County Courthouse in Norristown. The focus of the rally will be on building a coalition that stands for justice, equity, and human rights in this time of need. Check out Pat LaMarche's article on the rally on the Bucks County Beacon's website. Let's see how this is going to go. And one of the oldest right-wing conspiracy organizations in the country just won't go away. Now the John Birch Society is finding rich ground for recruiting members of Bucks County Republicans. It might be a great time to check out Mike Gambone's review of Matthew Dallek's book, Birchers, How the John Birch Society Radicalized the American Right. That was published in the Bucks County Beacon a short time ago. Got to learn about them now, find out what they've done, and be prepared for the future. What can I say? And you want a little peek into what we can expect from the education reform movement under Trump? Well, those rich anti-public school zealots are bringing AI to their crusade. Peter Green reports in the Beacon on how Mackenzie Price, a Texas businesswoman, is expanding her all-AI cyber charter schools in Pennsylvania. Kids only need to go to school for 2 hours a day. That's all you need, baby. Price is, quote, awaiting approval from the Pennsylvania Department of Education that would bring the same cyber charter model to cash in on the Commonwealth's already crowded, yet still profitable and underperforming cyber school marketplace. Pennsylvania's agricultural sector may be hit hard by Trump's plans for mass deportation or even the threat of them. As the Pennsylvania Capital Star reports, more than 155,000 people who work in the sector are migrant workers, and around 30,000 of those are expected or are assumed to be undocumented. Pennsylvania State House Representative Jose Guerral, vice chair of the Pennsylvania Legislative Latino Caucus and member of the House Labor and Industry Committee, told the Capital Star, quote, President-elect Trump's mass deportation plan would have a devastating impact on our agricultural industry, our largest industry generating tens of billions of dollars in revenue and economic activity every year. And losing these workers could send everyone's groceries bills skyrocketing. So, stock up on those mushrooms, Christmas trees, fruit, and dairy while you can. The story of Christian nationalism's rise in this country is not just about the actions of right-wing billionaires influencing our elections and politics. It's also rooted in everyday examples in our community. Harrisburg's Wild Heart Ministries has come under some pressure for using its charity work to spread the gospel of Christian nationalism. Yeah, I think it's time we start taking a look at some of these Christian ministries that are happening in our communities and find out where they're rooted. Well, that's only kind of like scratching the surface of this week's menu, but I don't know how much we can actually eat right now, Cyril. What's going on, man?
Oh, not too much. How are you doing, Kevin?
No, dude, I'm decent. I've got our semester starts a little later than usual this year, so I'm doing some extra prep, which feels good. Teaching a class on new media story and change, which will be talking about kind of stories of the rise of fascism and things like this, which will be kind of nice on how to combat that. So that's got me motivated.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it's there, and I'm not looking forward to this inauguration day coming up on Sunday, but I got to say, like I said in the in the intro, that interview that we did on the Signal this week was really just great and had me really hopeful about looking forward.
Yeah, Dr. Anita Varma. She's a media professor at UT Austin, and she leads, the university's Solidarity Journalism Initiative, and they're just doing great work. And it's just about, you know, you can call it solidarity journalism, but it's really just it should just be journalism, how journalism's done, right? Um, Turning to the communities impacted the most by the policies that are kind of being forced on them from above, and centering their lived experiences and concerns when telling these stories rather than just kind of I think sometimes lazily relying on or turning to the usual suspects of just kind of local officials or just kind of like viewing society from the top down rather than the bottom up.
Yeah, and I really think it just got me kind of reinforced this this notion that especially in this country we tend to look at through everything through this pro con either or lens, and that maps well onto like a two-party political system, right? So the assumption is that okay, there's these two sides to stories, right? There's the side from the Republicans and the side from the Democrats, right? That these are two sides, and that's it's always so deeply problematic, just as a kind of way of understanding like how to think about the world. But what I really love about what she said in that interview is that look, if you want to know what's going on, if you want to know what real concerns are, that means you actually have to talk to actual people. They're the experts in their lives, right? And too often what happens, as journalism has become quote unquote professionalized, right? And those journalists have become part of that class or see themselves as part of that class of kind of like the professional managerial class. They just turn to other people in that class for, quote unquote experts for that. But, while I'm not saying those experts are not valuable, but they have a really limited picture upon what's happening in the lives of everyday people. So to say that, hey, part of the job of journalism, right, if it's going to be quote unquote objective or wants to know truth and what's actually happening, it means actually going to those people that are going to be most impacted or are, from the community, or just finding out what's happening in communities. It's really good.
Yeah, and you know, I think the interview is really timely, especially given the kind of cratering public trust in mainstream media reporting, which actually kind of goes across the political spectrum, even though the numbers are much worse with like Republicans and so-called independents um, who said you know their range of trust in the media is maybe like between like 15 and 25%, but even with Democrats it's like only like just over 50%
Right.
have a solid trust in the media, and that's a problem. Right, and that's an issue that affects just um, not only having like informed citizens but just like democracy as a whole.
Yeah, and I think that, and as you start going down the demographics, like to younger folks, like those numbers get worse and worse. So like even among so quote unquote Democrats or liberal leaning Democrats, even like the 50%, like just over 50% number is being held up by the folks on the older end of the spectrum. It is not. I mean, younger folks are not buying in.
They're not
Um,
reading it.
no, they're not. And I hear this again and again. I hear this from my students. I hear this from my kids, um, and which is why I think this TikTok story has gotten so much traction, is because that's where they're getting their information, right? When they think about media and information, they think about TikTok. Now, again, like all these social media platforms, right? TikTok is not delivering the news, right? Even those quote unquote creators that are on there kind of talking about the news, are those folks are interpreting the news based upon kind of reporting and sources and things like this, or on the ground independent media stuff. But it's had a way of kind of breaking through, I think, especially kind of for younger folks, where they're trusting in those kind of platforms in ways that are, I distinctly new, but also deeply problematic given the kind of hold of these, giant tech companies have. But but anyways, I mean, I'm curious that the fact that we've got the Supreme Court upholding this ban, the ban unanimously today, that that will be TikTok will be banned on Sunday if it doesn't, unless it sells its stuff, and there's no indication that it's going to sell things. Um, you got any kind of like thoughts on that? I mean, like how you think through this, because again, I think this is not for me one of these easy like on off either or, pro con kind of things.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. It's just like what's that saying? Like, don't hate the player, hate the game, right? Like, I don't think TikTok in and of itself is the problem that we're dealing with. Um, I'm kind of I really don't. I have a hard time like supporting just the ban of it. I really do. I think that's I don't know, that's not issue that I'm willing to kind of like get behind. But I mean, what do you think?
Well, no, I mean, I think like I'm in the same boat. I mean, I have these really interesting, conversations with my kids, and like I said, with my students on this stuff. But like, I mean, I look at it like this: is like, first of all, I have just a problem with the whole discussion being framed as a defense of TikTok. I
Yeah.
mean, these are like giant global corporations, right? And I'm not waving their banner. Sorry,
Mhm.
right? I'm not going to come to the defense of TikTok uncritically, right? Because there are deep problems in that. And one of them, yes, is that the fact that the Chinese government has kind of in the past had kind of these back doors that are open to that stuff. But that's not the least of the problem. I mean, even the most of the problems. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the way that these algorithms drive content in particular kind of ways, is part of the issue, right? And so how do we kind of deal with this kind of media environment? And I think the fact that you have this anti-China kind of mentality within US, both parties and like in the US government, allowed TikTok to be an easy target for them to perform their outrage about these giant tech companies.
Yeah, it's not like American tech is going to save us.
which is which I mean, like this literally in the aftermath of like Mark Zuckerberg like taking off all the controls, Elon Musk buying out Twitter. I mean, literally,
Mm,
like this is the American version, right? And these are the people that we're supposed to, I mean, that's what I mean. It's like, look, these are giant corporations. The problem is that they're giant corporations, unregulated by any kind of democratic kind of control.
Yeah, but like you said, it's just the fact that it's a Chinese company, which kind of,
Yeah.
plays into this hysteria.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's great because it appeals the kind of like the old baby boomers, Red Scare crap, and the kind of the new emergent kind of like anti-immigrant racists, right? All that kind of stuff. Like they all get to kind of play their hand in their kind of own different ways with this. So
Yeah, having a South African, probably pro-apartheid led, social media giant like X is so much better.
right, exactly. And what I found really interesting though is that you've got all these folks that were on TikTok that they've left TikTok or they've opened up new accounts on Red Note. I don't know if you saw this, but Red Note is a Chinese owned social media company. And they're just like, I mean, it's like, flipping off the government. Like, okay, right. You want to ban them? We're going to go to the actual Chinese owned one. And we don't care because you guys will keep on doing it. Come on, follow us there. Like my son first told me about this. And then I was like reading about it. I'm like, it's hilarious. I mean, hilarious in like the most like, like, just kind of, sticking your nose and sticking your finger in the eye of the person. It's like, even the people that are doing it, they don't have any faith in this company, right? But they're like, okay, come on, you want to ban TikTok? We're gonna go and do this. Chase us now. So
Let's
it's
see what
fascinating.
happens.
Yeah. So anyways, we'll see how that plays out. The one thing is Biden has said that he will not, I mean, his last day is on Sunday, the day that the ban's supposed to go into place. He says that they're not going to enforce it. It's his last day, he's going to nap. And then so it's all going to be at the feet of the Trump administration, which is going to be really interesting to see how they're going to play that all out. Especially given, how embedded TikTok is with kind of young folks. So we'll see. We also got news about the ceasefire in Israel and Gaza. Again, we'll see if this holds. It's supposed to go for this, it supposedly passed. That's what all the headlines are, but it's got to go to another vote of the ministries, I guess, in order for it to be officially approved to actually go into effect. And the news was breaking even after it was announced that the ceasefire and this supposedly went into effect and was approved by the Israeli government. There were still bombings in northern Gaza, which several children were killed. And we'll see, is all I can say.
Yeah, I mean that was I think that is a big the biggest foreign policy failure of the Biden administration is not being able to kind of exert any kind of diplomatic pressure on Israel to kind of just halt this horrifying destruction and just devastating killing of thousands of civilians in Palestine. And I think it just kind of speaks to that we really don't have the standing maybe that we once had or aren't able or capable of kind of exerting global pressure, even with a country that's supposed to be an ally, right? Israel is supposed to be one of our strongest allies.
Well, I would say, in some ways, that question wasn't answered. I mean, what pressure did the U.S. put on Israel at all?
Yeah, that's.
I mean, we're
true.
just handing over stockpiles of weapons. And, even when it came to this kind of hard line on delivering of humanitarian aid, the U.S. did nothing when Israel completely violated it. The Israeli government violated it and was kind of destroying kind of supply lines. I mean, what real threat ever came through? I think what it showed more than anything else was that, okay, that any kind of discipline of Israel, right, by this past government, right, and kind of, I mean, not the Biden administration alone, but this past government was just really kind of again, performative. It wasn't really about solving the problem. It was just about unconditional support of Israel, and we're gonna say some nice things about humanitarian aid. But I think the Biden administration only started getting worried about it in the end, when it's tens of thousands of people in Gaza were slaughtered. including all these kids, and it was breaking through because of things like TikTok and things.
Yeah, and you know, and this is obviously like, you know, the way we handled this conflict, um, with, you know, you, as you kind of pointed out with kid gloves, is not exclusive to, you know, our diplomatic relations with Israel. You know, it's often, if you like think back to the Cold War, right? You know, a lot of our allies were, um, you know, had various, on the political scale, like some were like dictators, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, Rios Man in Guatemala. All that mattered was he was an anti-communist, so
Yep.
you know he could just, you know, perform genocide on the native population. But we weren't gonna, you know, like I think Carter tried to rein in like kind of like the Central American regimes, which is one of the, you know, good things about his presidency. But like, you know, with like someone like Reagan, you know, he flipped the switch the other way and pretty much gave them like a green light to do whatever they wanted, you know, with impunity. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, what that shows us is just like we need to have like kind of like a constructive foreign policy approach when like one of our allies is doing something that just falls outside the norms of, you know, international law or human, you know, just global human rights.
Well, and not even norms. I mean, these are actual laws on the books. Like even the United States has laws on the books that say that you have to deliver humanitarian aid, and it just ignored it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's basically saying we don't care. Yes, we passed this law, but we passed this law thinking we would never have to deal with it. And so now that we have to deal with it, we're just not going to deal with it. Right? I mean, that's what it is. And the thing, you know, I think the other side of this too, though, it just shows you the change. Like, first of all, like what principles really, right, does the US government now stand on? Right. I mean,
Well, we have no
like
moral high ground either.
no,
Right?
that's
Like,
not, there's nothing anymore. That's what I mean. It's vacuous and empty at this point. There is no articulation of principles that mean anything concretely, like in practice to people. Right? It's the same kind of thing that has eroded away any kind of sense of trust within institutions. On the flip side of that, the other problem is just the money in politics,
sure.
right? Is because I mean, one of the big reasons why we get the foreign policy we got is not because we're making some principled stance in Israel. It's because the sheer amount of like hundreds of millions of dollars like pro-Israeli PACs are pouring into U.S. government, and that is regardless of party. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they are just like putting their thumb on every scale, every election we can see that would have anything critical of it. Now, that is like, in my book, that's like foreign influence of elections.
Yeah.
Right, that we would chastise in if it was China or if it was Russia, but this is foreign influence in elections. But or you have the politicians on both sides of the aisle just happily accepting this money. I mean, this is the effect of things like Citizens United and
Mhm.
completely corrupting this political system.
Yeah, and it's a global problem which goes well beyond Israel's borders and around the world. I mean, they just have a very kind of strong kind of machinery within the United States, carrying that out. But other states are doing the same thing.
Yep.
Right?
No. 100%, 100%. Well, I mean, I know we see. I mean, we've got the stuff on the Trump nominations and things like this. We've got Biden's farewell address. I mean, I don't have a huge investment of diving too deeply into that. But do you have any kind of thoughts on either of those things before we kind of get into the really good meat of the show?
No, I mean, again, like just from reiterating what we talked about last week, like if Fetterman votes to confirm like Pete Hegseth, right, and Kash Patel, um, you know, he should. I mean, I don't know if we should excommunicate him from the Democratic Party, the so-called, you know, wannabe Pope of Greenland, but yeah, that's a real problem, and yeah, I think there was something today about like him trying to kind of fill this Joe Manchin,
Yeah.
you know, Kristen Cinema role, and I saw that, you know, as ringing endorsements go, Kevin McCarthy thinks he should head the Democratic Party, which I think it's kind of funny, but it's not sad. But God help us if that ever happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think that seems to be what's driving like Fetterman's politics now is attention. I mean, that's
Mm.
I mean, I don't know how else to put it because it's the people that got him elected did not elect him for this shit. So,
Yeah.
but anyways, and I whatever, there's all this kind of like coverage of Biden's farewell address and him saying that, about the tech industrial complex and all this stuff. And I have to say is like, that was, I was like,
Too little,
whatever.
too late.
Yeah, it's like, whatever. Okay. Where you been, and whatever.
Well, he did some good things. I really think like he shot himself in the foot like this last, let's just say, year and a half. One, he never should have ran for re-election. He should have kept to his initial promise, which he said when
Yeah.
when he was first elected, that he was going to be a one-term bridge to the next generation, right, of leadership in the Democratic Party and hopefully for the country. He robbed the party and the country of that opportunity by allowing the Democrats to have a kind of, vibrant, primary, and then he settled Kamala Harris with almost an impossible task, giving her just over 100 days to launch, run, and campaign for the presidency. Um, and shame on the handlers that kind of, you know, really tried to manage, if not manufacture, you know, a, a new reality of what was actually happening. Um, so it's a shame. I feel like he did accomplish some like good things, and especially like getting us through COVID and just kind of like strengthening the social safety net. But in the end, with that and just with some of the foreign policy decisions and actions that he took, his legacy's mixed, I think, at best.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first couple years of his presidency um, were remarkable,
Mhm.
and I've said this before: is the policy, at least domestic policies, the most progressive domestic policy agenda in my lifetime, in terms of actually practical things that were passed and so on. Right now, that's not saying a lot, right? Because like I grew up in the Reagan, like in the aftermath of Reagan, but I'm saying pro labor, right? Taking affirmative kind of steps to kind of like, get people on the National Labor Relations Board to really strategically think about how you deal with drawing down kind of the burning of fossil fuels, like through this kind of export ban and things like, I mean, really interesting policy stuff, which was never communicated very effectively to everybody else, right? To the rest of the world, including us, but nonetheless was done. And I think that, really Ron Klain, who was his chief of staff at the beginning of his administration, was really a driving powerhouse behind a lot of that. And I don't mean to kind of like sideline Biden on that, but I'm seeing like Ron Klain knew how to kind of get things done and take things that Biden and the administration around Biden wanted to do and get it done. And I think that he retired. I think it was like beginning of 2023. That's when we saw a real turn for, like, I don't know, back to the norm of kind of Biden as the conservative Democrat. But really that had more to do with the staff changes in many ways. And then the fact that he couldn't communicate his agenda for the last time was really difficult. I mean, I'll never take away from him the positive stuff that the guy brought, but I mean, it's like, okay, you can't just worry about your legacy now. It's got to be done every day of your presidency. But
Was it the most progressive domestic policy since Nixon? Because Nixon started the EPA and
yeah,
OSHA, right?
right.
Which could you imagine if a Republican tried to do that now? They'd be burned at the stake.
Yeah, one of Richard Nixon's kind of like legacies, affirmative action, right? I mean, it's like, I mean, affirmative action and the Department of Environmental Protection. I mean, come on, like
Yeah.
the radical left institutions, right? That have been waged war with, like Republicans who brought it in. It's just like crazy. But whatever. I was really happy to see that that you highlighted this rally that's coming up tomorrow in Montgomery County. The People's Rally. It's going to take place in Montgomery County Courthouse in Norristown at noon tomorrow. And Pat LaMarche had a great kind of write up and story about this. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, I a shout out to Monco's Danielle Phillips and Stephanie Vincent for thinking nationally and acting locally and organizing this event. Um, because this is what we need to see like moving forward. And the whole idea of this event is to kind of, help channel people into different kind of organizing efforts that correspond with maybe the issues that kind of matter most to them. And one quote that I thought really summed it up really well was Danielle Phillips, who said, "We are not okay with our neighbors living in fear and feeling that they have no support and feeling that the vast power of the government, the federal government, could be coming after them." And that's what's going to happen, right? Like that, the Trump has already promised that from day one, whether it is mass deportations and roundups of immigrants, whether it's in workplaces or, God help us, schools, or just kind of like taking away protections for LGBTQ students, and just kind of fanning the flames of hate and intolerance, which kind of make their existence almost unbearable, if not illegal.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I think that I'm hoping, and I think, well, I think part of it's going to happen by necessity, but I love the frame from which Danielle Phillips and others are looking at this as really as, okay, this is an opportunity to organize. Like, this is not just about outrage, right? But it's actually about saying, like, no, we're actually going to look for opportunities of connecting. Um, and hopefully, again, I think there's been enough established. What I thought was very interesting in the story is it also shows that, like, in Montgomery County, right? Montgomery County, Trump lost in Montgomery County,
Yeah.
right, which represents a kind of real shift in that county over kind of a couple decades, and a large part been by the organizing efforts by people in that community. I know that, for example, in the North Penn School District, they had a lot of the same kind of issues that we had here in Bucks County, or in Penridge and Central Bucks, and they organized, right, and basically took over that school board and have been running it as a majority effectively now, kind of since then. And that's like just another example of that long-term organizing. The one thing I don't know, I'm not so sure about, like Pat LaMarche, she's writing it up and talk about maybe what reason why we don't have a People's March in Bucks County has to do with that. um Trump won in Bucks County, stuff like that. But if you look at the margin, right? The margin was only, as they say, like 291 votes, right? That's
Yeah,
pretty remarkable.
and I think like the fact that we lost, but the Democrats lost Bucks County is more of a reason why there should be, this similar type of organizing effort or people's rally happening in Bucks. And, quite frankly, I'm disappointed we're not seeing something like that happen, because I mean, if you look at the list of speakers, that the Montco has, you have the Montgomery County Commissioner Jamila Winder, State Senator Amanda Cappelletti, PA Youth Votes Angie Hinton. You have Clean Air Council Liz Schultz. You have people from the immigrant communities and immigrant solidarity networks like HIAS. Um, we have people like that doing like amazing work in Bucks County as well. I just, again, I think it's really disappointing that we're not seeing, um, you know, we're not seeing something similar. I don't think necessarily this has to be like a Democratic Party, like top-down organized event, but maybe the Democratic Party should have some, skin in the game with something like this, uh, to kind of organize a similar event. And what we're seeing on the right is that you have mega millionaire Jim Worthington throwing this little like inauguration day
Yeah.
gala at the NAC, bringing in like local radio hosts Dom Giordano, KL and Company, Dawn Streisland, hosting an event, all-day event from 6 to 3, just really solidifying, a somewhat ascendant right wing in Bucks County. And I think it's going to be a problem moving forward because he's going to be doubling down. Like there's blood in the water now, and sharks like him or like Paul Martino, they're going to be doubling down with their money and their efforts to kind of expand this MAGA base in Bucks County.
I do think you're 100% right about that. And the one thing that I'll push back a little on is that I do think, while I hear that, what you're saying about like not having a kind of similar kind of event in Bucks County, I also think that's important that we recognize that, okay, that doesn't mean there's nothing happening,
Yep.
right? Because what's going to be interesting to me and to follow and to continue to see how this plays out is the ways in which organizing is manifesting in different ways. Because I also know, there's like really some hyper local organizing going on, where the discussions are, how do we get, let's start recruiting candidates for these local elections that are coming up here. Now, again, that's just when we're talking about official electoral politics. But it's going to be interesting to see how that happens in Bucks County, given that kind of like really knockdown, drag out fights around the school board stuff, that I think both took a lot out of people, but also really cemented an organizing culture and some like nascent organizations here. So we'll see where that comes out. Um, yeah. But I think that, again, we're going to need to see much more publicly stuff, given the fact that Bucks County is such I don't know, like a magnet for these kind of like MAGA billionaires.
Yeah.
But crazy. But do check out that great article by Pat LaMarche on it. Montgomery County's the People's Rally on Saturday highlights how resistance to Trump starts locally. Great stuff. Remember, that is a 12 noon tomorrow at the Montgomery County Courthouse in Norristown. Do check it out, the People's March. I'll do my best to put a link in the show notes to the full flyer and everything. But do check it out. It's going to be, I think, a really important event in marking the kind of organizing moving forward. You have this kind of other kind of note on, and I didn't realize that, John Birch Society is always there, right? They always show up. They've always got their freaking card table with their kind of like pamphlets about British, like secretly trying to take over the US again and reclaiming it all, whatever. But their ridiculousness is also matched by their persistence and their organizing, right? I mean, the fact that they continue to kind of like peddle this stuff. And you had this tweet, right? Not tweet, it's no longer tweets, right? Because we're not on Twitter anymore. It's like had this post on Blue Sky, right? Basically pointing to how the John Birch Society is actually kind of doing some recruiting in Bucks County. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, it's just something that caught my eye. And like you said, the Birchers, I know like in the past few years, they've kind of like peeked their head into Penridge school board meetings,
Yep.
especially when there's a, MAGA, Moms for Liberty, like super majority. But the Warrington Republicans are hosting an event, as well as Andy Meehan's Right for Bucks. They're having one of the Birchers come in to present and recruit for the group. And I think like we tweeted out, Bucks County is fertile ground, like fertile recruiting ground, for the Birchers, because the grassroots of the Bucks County Republican Party is so far right. So just to kind of remind people of like who the John Birch Society was, like they kind of like, they were a reaction to the Cold War, and just kind of a very kind of paranoid, conspiracy theory riddled, right-wing social movement in the country, which had a lot of sway with the Republican Party, leading up to Barry Goldwater. And some of the things that they believed in was just like, Martin Luther King Jr. was a communist agent, right? They, like Alex Jones today, they talked about like the fluoride in the water. Eisenhower was deeply infiltrated with like, communist agents, etc. And in Michael Gambone's book review of Matthew Dallek's book, Birchers, How the John Birch Society Radicalized the American Right. He was able to really kind of draw the connections between the Birchers and movements today, like Moms for Liberty. They're cut from the same cloth, right? Like the Birchers thought the communists were infiltrating public schools and that they were, quote unquote, brainwashing people, and the John Birch Society would harass teachers to the point that they want to quit and leave the district, and librarians as well. That's what we're seeing today with Moms for Liberty, here in Bucks County, where, they went on a podcast and actually said that they believe that public schools are trying to make pedophilia okay, and they're trying to introduce that into the classroom, right? Like, this is batshit crazy, this is insane, but these people have sway politically, locally, and then they're endorsing candidates. They endorsed candidates in Central Bucks. Some of their members ran for school board in Central Bucks and in Penridge, or on the Penridge school board. And so, yeah, it just, for me, it just kind of like stuck out because it really speaks to this moment that we find ourselves in, where, far right extremism has become the status quo.
Yeah, and as extreme as the John Birch Society is, I mean, what they're extraordinarily good at doing, especially in the kind of environment that we have right now, which has all this kind of conspiracy stuff going on, the far right is really ascendant in so many ways, is that they get these kind of crazy stuff into the bloodstream. Right. And that's, and really that has been their role throughout history. I mean, the Koch brothers, right? The Koch brothers' father, right, got his start in the John Birch Society. So we talk about Koch brothers and dark money and all this stuff. Its roots get traced back to that John Birch Society, right? And again, they've always been marginal. They've always been on the kind of extreme and the kind of like little kooky on the conspiracy stuff. But what they do is they'll show up to like all these events, and they will start putting this nonsense into the political bloodstream, into the discourse, such that it makes kind of like some whatever standard like extreme right people seem palatable, right, by comparison. But the discourse still gets in there. So
Yeah, it's mainstream now. I mean, even with Fox
right.
News, like them suggesting like Joe Biden is a communist, right? Either you
Right.
don't know what communism is, or just like, I mean, I don't know. It's just the most absurd thing. But, and then you have like, the new torchbearers of the Bircher movement, which would have been like someone like Rush Limbaugh, Alex Jones. I'd even lump like Dom Giordano
Yeah.
and even JD Mullane at the Courier Times, who was for over 2 decades was a far right columnist, and now is a quote unquote straight news reporter. And Mullane, they're just to kind of pivot a little bit, like he was just promoting Andy Meehan's organizing of buses to the inauguration on Monday. So they had an article, and for those of you who don't know, like Andy Meehan is the leader of the far right group, Right for Bucks, right? But he has a lot of grassroots support within the Bucks County GOP. Now, this is someone who ran against Fitzpatrick in the Republican primary. When he announced that he was running, he on Twitter he was putting out like QAnon hashtags. He's a QAnon follower. He's someone who has tweeted that Barack Obama should be lynched on the White House lawn. He's called Kamala Harris a bleeping whore, and he has a music band, and they even wrote a song about it. And this is someone that the Bucks County Courier-Times thinks it's a good idea to kind of mainstream, right, and promote. So thus, like, kind of legitimizing him, sane-washing him. Like, you can't be so bad if, like, the Bucks County Courier-Times is promoting his events. And this is like just the Courier-Times continuing to radicalize the local Republican base here in Bucks County, and it's just disgusting.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, yeah. Like you say, I mean, Andy Meehan is basically, one of the things too as well. I don't remember how public this person was about it, so I'm not going to leave their name out of it now. For now, that's not for want to not credit this person, but one who actually showed up to one of their online training meetings, right? That was going to open to everyone, and found out that you know what, like that organization, Meehan's organization, is one that is dedicated to basically getting rid of the leadership in the Bucks County GOP and having people run for those offices, doing concrete training about how to get these kind of extremists elected. That's the kind of organization that's happening there, and he is like spearhead. Anyways, that's Andy Meehan got off. I think we should also run a contest. By the way, we start running a poll and a contest that basically say at what kind of like moment in the show will Cyril kind of turn his gaze to the Courier Times? I wait for it every week, man.
They've been my pinata for so long now.
Yeah.
It's like muscle memory.
Yeah.
I need to take a few swings.
You have to. No, I mean, a deserving target. Like, I mean, over and over again. I mean, you can't say it enough. I want to get to this story about Peter Green, which I think is going to, has the potential to have it like really significant consequences to public education in Pennsylvania. I mean, yes, nationally, but really, if this actually works in Pennsylvania, he's reporting on Mackenzie Price's move to try to kind of bring her AI cyber charter into the Pennsylvania kind of charter system. I was like, just like, you got to be freaking kidding me. And I've heard this woman's name before. I know that she's been active in that space, but this is a whole new level aimed at destroying public education.
Yeah, so she has an application to open a cyber charter school in PA. There was a hearing held in November, and then public comment, which is now closed. So a decision is looming, in the coming weeks or months, if it takes that long. But what her school would do, it would be teacherless, right? And so it's just the students would be using AI apps to kind of guide their learning. And according to Phillips, is that she believes that students only need 2 hours of daily instruction in the core subjects, right? Which kind of flies in the face with some of like the rhetoric with the right, where like we just want reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? And I guess history. So I'm not sure how that would work, but this idea of replacing teachers with AI and apps, it's disturbing, right? You're a professor, you're a teacher. I'm interested on your take on this.
Well, I've seen this coming all the time. As a matter of fact, I've said this. We talk about AI in my classes, right? In a lot of ways, like how this is actually like influencing the way that kind of discourse and media is happening, and what roles does this play. I've always been like of the mind of when you have these new emergent technologies, regardless of what they are, is that you don't just kind of play the kind of crisis of literacy model. We're like, oh my God, the sky is falling, this is gonna kill it. You got to understand, okay, what are the potential implications here? And really think about what goes on. Like I saw, and the example that I just came across this week again is they had this where AI was able to identify breast cancer, right, significantly more like earlier than traditional kind of means of doing it, right? And the woman who's writing this article, I wish I had it kind of like loaded up here, but she was saying is like, this is what we want AI for, right? This is the whole idea. If we can have things that can better detect and better and kind of improve our ability to do things that, again, just like can do it quicker, more faster, more effectively, that's great. Where AI is not effective is in the interpersonal communications, right? And the kind of humanities more broadly, right? How we, for example, negotiate in a democracy, how we think critically through a problem. That takes a kind of exchange back and forth. But there's been this mythology, both in corporate America and with the educational sector for years, is that, you can just replace that kind of interchange, the interrelationships among people with static information driven modules, right? And this, I mean, so I mean, and I think, and my friend, Jim Zabrowski, who was my mentor in grad school, I'll never forget. I probably told this story before, but we were doing an independent study one summer, and he was all frustrated about something or other. And I came into his office, and he's like, he looks at this, he puts his hand down at his desk, and he just like points at the computer on his desk, right? And he said, "You know what that is?" I'm like, "What, Jim? What's that?" And he's like, "That is the replacement of the two secretaries that used to be here in the English department. And now it is my responsibility to do these things that were formerly done by else, right? Under the kind of model of efficiency, right? That is the pattern of capitalism, right? Is always to go after how can you displace workers who are more difficult to control than machines, right? And how do you turn it into a machine? That's really what the issue is. And when you come right down and you look at what Mackenzie Price is saying in here, she's like, look, can it be done? She says, school is broken and we're here to fix it. 2-hour learning gives students an AI tutor that allows them to learn 2 times in 2 hours, like twice as quickly in 2 hours. You do that. Really what the target is there is profitability for this organization and completely taking teachers out of the picture. It's an attack on teachers, an attack on critical thinking, an attack upon like democracy at its core, because you have to have critical citizens to be able to kind of deal with this. And if you look at what these schools are about, right, their tuition is $40,000 a year for some of these schools. Right? $40,000 a year. So, and this has always been what the charter school movement is about. And if you read any of their kind of materials, you look at the back, it's always about using public money. They're not against public funding of education, right? But they want it to go to private interests. So they want to take our tax dollars, and instead of going to an institution that is accountable, as rough a time as we had with the Board of Education, I'd rather have that than some private ownership by some corporation that I have no access to or no say in what they do, right? This is what they want to do. Because what happens in the end here? If you take teachers out of that, that is the largest expense of education, right? Is actually putting people who are highly qualified with expertise and understanding of a classroom dynamics that can teach kids, put them in the classrooms and invest in that. And that's why they cost some money, because people need to be paid for that. If you can take them out of the equation and pretend that you're delivering the same thing and doing the same thing by using modules and AI now to give it the appearance that they're talking to somebody, which really they're just talking to a machine, right? Then Mackenzie Price is going to make a boatload of cash.
Oh,
That's what it's about.
It's a grift, right?
It is such the grift.
So that like their projection is for like eventually like 500 students at $40,000 a year. That's $20 million. And this is getting subsidized too, right? So taxpayers are helping foot the bill for this.
Exactly. I mean, even if she proposes to have the cost at half that, look at. I mean, seriously, that is a boatload of money. And especially every single study that comes out is cyber charters over and over and over again, especially in Pennsylvania, because our laws are horrific when it comes to cyber charter schools. Again, they either are the best ones perform around the same as kind of like your average public school, but the vast majority of them fall far short in terms of outcomes and student learning. So here we go.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they get rejected. like, we can still hold on to hope for that. There's been a couple states where I think it was like North Carolina, Arkansas and Utah rejected applications from Phillips for Unbound. So, but we'll see. I mean, it's going to be devastating if they open the floodgates for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what you got to understand is like, why that matter? Like, I mean, again, you might be thinking, people might be thinking like, hey, look, okay, yeah, so some kind of 500 people want to kind of like waste their money on kind of like poor education with AI models. Yeah, let them. That's not the issue. Like, the charter schools, like that whole movement is always understood is the reason why you've got like, for example, in Pennsylvania, part of the laws in charter schools is the charter school has to get paid first, right? Before the public schools get their funding, right? So basically what that means, the more students that go over to something like this cyber charter, right, the more that bleeds money out of the public schools and into the hands of these kind of like profiteers, right? What does that mean for your kid's school? It means that it will face additional like defunding on top of education cuts that have already taken place, which puts more strain on local communities because of the crappy, crazy ass way that we fund education in this country, on local taxpayers to fund that school. And we know how people feel about taxes. Right. So what does that do? That you're going to have a school which is going to kind of be performing not as well because it's been more funding has been taken away. Parents getting more angry, right, and being more kind of ready to accept things like charter schools. That is shock doctrine, Naomi Klein, classic textbook model of what's going on here.
And with the Trump administration taking power these next 4 years, we're gonna, the plan is to dismantle public education. So this is going to be something to kind of a story to watch moving forward. And the Beacon's really lucky to have Peter Green writing for us because
My
he's
God,
just
yes.
a tremendous resource, and his reporting on the not just on the cyber and charter school grift, but as well as his reporting on the attack, broader attacks on public education, whether it's groups like the Independence Law Center, etc. It's just been invaluable.
Yeah, he look, Independent Law Center, the Bradley Foundation. I mean, the list after list that he kind of reports on is like, I mean, I was following his blog like years ago,
Yeah.
to try to understand the kind of the lay of the land and kind of in this area, and he's just absolutely amazing. The fact that he's writing for the Beacon now is incredible. So head on over there. Do check out Peter Green's article. It's fantastic. The title of it is Texas Businesswoman Wants to Open AI-Driven Teacherless Cyber Charter Schools in Pennsylvania. Peter Green's work is really like just absolutely top-notch and a must-reads. Check it out. You had this other story that was published in the Capital Star about the potential impact of Trump's kind of deportation kind of dream on the agricultural sector in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes I feel like the Trump supporters don't really think through what they're supposedly supporting, because one, what he's going to do is just negatively impact our businesses, and two, if we want to talk about like, the price of groceries, which Trump promised to, lower before he said, no, I can't actually do that. What he's actually going to do is end up raising the prices, through this massive deportation program, because, a lot of these immigrants that are going to get round up, they're the ones that are working on the farms. And this is work that, um, you know, quite frankly, these white male MAGA supporters aren't going to want to do themselves, because one, they're working 10 or 12 hours, a day in the hot sun, and two, it's just grueling, underpaid work. I mean, it just, a slightly different industry, but I have a friend in Bucks County who owns a landscaping company.
Yeah.
He has to hire immigrants because there's absolutely no white people that like that are applying for the jobs when he puts out notices in the newspapers, or if they do, he has to fire them because they just can't handle the work.
Right. I remember there was a story that came out several years ago by this farmer up outside of Wilkes-Barre. Um, it was, during a time when they were kind of going after immigrants in Pennsylvania, right? Again, same kind of thing we're seeing now. This is probably like 10 years ago now, though. I forget who's the dude up there who was um, he was the mayor of a town, and I don't know, I don't forget, but he passed laws kicking all kind of immigrants out and things like
Is in
this.
Hazleton?
In Hazleton, yeah, in Hazleton,
Okay.
yeah, whoever that dude was, I forget his name now. Very unforgettable person, but they were interviewing, like, one of the local papers up there had this long story to interview with a guy who a farmer who farmed tomatoes, right, and who was a Republican, who was conservative, and all this stuff, and was saying like, you just don't understand. He's like, I've offered like $15 an hour. This is well before, right? Like, big move here. $15 an hour, right? I've actively tried to recruit from people that are local, right? From here like this, and nobody wants to work.
Yeah.
He said, you want to kind of like yell at somebody? Why don't you yell at the kind of people with the work ethic rather here? Says, meanwhile, if these laws pass and these exclusions pass, right, I'm going to be put out of business, right? Because I cannot find a way of harvesting tomatoes, right, without employing kind of, like, immigrant labor. And he said, frankly, he said something along the lines. I remember his line. Something, frankly, he's like, I don't care if they're undocumented. They're there. They work hard, right, and they allow me to actually have a business.
And it's not just the undocumented workers though, because what we've seen, and
Right.
we've seen this debate play out online, is that the MAGA white nationalist kind of base don't want any foreign workers,
Correct.
in there. So like,
Exactly.
we could see them rolling back like the H-2A program, which is the federal program to allow employers to hire temporary ag workers. So it's just like, these people want a white ethno state, right? But they're not going to have anyone that are actually going to work these jobs that society as a whole depends on.
Yeah, I mean, there's this law, right, that they're trying to pass right now. That's basically that will allow for the detention, right, of undocumented immigrants if they have been accused of a crime.
Yeah.
Accused,
Mhm.
right, with no evidence, right, nothing like this. So, in other words, I could call up because I don't like brown people in my community, and I say, hey, my neighbor just killed my dog,
Mhm.
and I think they're an undocumented immigrant. Under that, if they are successful in making that part of the Trump administration's agenda, they could basically detain that person, right, and then basically ship them out, regardless of whether they've actually committed a crime or not, right? And what's that going to do? Just play this through your mind, everybody. If you are legally here and also brown skin in that environment, what are you going to do? Are you going to stick around? No, right? And that's the goal of these people.
Yeah, and I, what I could see moving forward is that like you're having like some of these MAGA folks like standing outside of like businesses or schools, kind of like writing down license plates, right,
Correct.
of
Exactly.
of
100%.
anyone that does not have pale white skin.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
just
Exactly.
horrifying. And then this is what we're going to have to organize against locally and then on a national level, but locally through supporting groups like Bucks County's immigrant rights action, which we've highlighted on our pages in the past, and we'll continue to be reporting about the the work that they're doing to protect our immigrant neighbors here in Bucks County.
Yeah, and I've got a feeling that Governor Shapiro's current stance on all this is not going to be effective. He was at the farm show, right, and basically saying like, "Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what actually goes place." That kind of lack of principled stance on things is not going to get the job done. This has been one of the failures of the Democratic leadership for a while, and these kind of people with presidential aspirations, they believe that they just have to talk this like nonsense, middle of the road, non-committal, anti-principle stance on stuff, and that's not what we need right now.
No, it just seems like the one thing he believes about most is himself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. So I know I do it once again, kind of rambling on here, so keeping this longer than we expected. But I do want to get to this story. Now you kind of put this story in. I want to talk about that. I thought it was a really interesting story and layered. Right, it has to do with this kind of Wild Heart Ministries in Harrisburg, right? That has done really kind of objectively some really good work, right, in terms of supporting people in the community. But there's this kind of potentially darker side to what this what's going on with here. Can you walk through the story?
Yeah, this was something in Penn Live.
Mhm.
Harrisburg's Wild Heart Ministries, fueled by faith, draws scrutiny over its motives, and what the journalist Ivy DeJesus really kind of explored or tried to uncover was you know the this organizations and their specifically their founders ties to Christian nationalism, right? um, and so for instance, like they were really friendly with Sean Foyt, who might be like one of the most visible faces of this really resurgent and strengthening Christian nationalist movement that we're seeing now. And indeed, this is like a Christian singer. He's been touring the country, having quote unquote revivals, as well as their ties to a local church, um, with specific ties to not just the Christian nationalist movement, but the new apostolic reformation,
Yeah.
which is something that we've reported about um, in the pages of the Bucks County Beacon, as well as I had a great interview with Fred Clarkson in the first season of The Signal, who's an expert on the NAR, and their goal to conquer the seven mountains of society, which is family, entertainment, government, education, etc.
Yeah, and I think that in this story, it's really interesting. The Hermans, the couple that started this ministry. As part of this reporting, was interesting. Said from Oklahoma to Harrisburg. In this one section of the article, say the Hermans arrived in Harrisburg in 2013, along with close friend Sean Foyt. Is that how you say that guy's name? Foyt, one of the most outspoken Christian nationalists in the country. They lived together in the Allison Hill Mansion, along with several dozen other missionaries. The Hermans are members of Burn 24/7, a global youth ministry group that includes Foyt, who used his national platform on Christian nationalism and dominionism to proclaim that Christians should rule the nation, right? So we see all these ties. And the other thing that I also thought was very interesting in this piece was said there's been this shift in those folks who are like some of the most ardent supporters of Christian nationalism, Christian nationalists, who are actively would deny that they're Christian nationalists. No, we're just doing the work of God, just work of God.
Sure.
But behind all that is a commitment to say the work of God is a Christian nationalist vision,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, groups like that are, a Trojan horse, oftentimes, to try to, they their outward faces is just about doing charitable works, but really they're trying to kind of, bring people into their movement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I don't know here. One of the things I said, I get very uncomfortable, right? It's just kind of like how I've always kind of grown up and things like this. When I see these kind of say church groups and church organizations, or these ministries having expansionist kind of things, and I see this happening in our own communities here in Bucks County. And I happen to I look at, I'm curious. This is just an open question because I'm not coming here with evidence, but I'm just curious, like, what's going on in those churches, right? What's going on in those places of worship, and how do they where are their ties, and how do they connect up with this broader stuff? So we shall see. So something actually for some kind of really, you know, go get them journalist out there wants to dig into some of the kind of what's happening locally. That'd be really cool to see. So there you go. But anyways, Cyril, so what else you got coming up in the Beacon? What's on the agenda?
Oh, we have a couple more interviews coming up on the Signal. So that's something to look forward to, which is really going to, really be exploring the topic we just talked about, Christian nationalists, the Catholic far right, and the very serious and dire threat that they pose, for the country and for democracy moving forward. And in addition to that, we're working on a story about how local school districts are preparing or not preparing for potential um, ICE officials coming in and disrupting, maybe taking immigrant children out of the local schools, and what kind of impact like them just trying to round up families in general might have on local students. And we're going to bring in some new writers that I've been talking to as well. We're going to be expanding our coverage of the Bucks County commissioners, and another topic that we're going to be reporting on is just reproductive rights, which are in the crosshairs of the Christian right and their King Cyrus, which they have in the White House, Donald Trump.
Well, there you have it. All the more reason to head on over to the buckscountybeacon.com, hit that support the Beacon button, and look, for little as $1 a month, you can become a supporter of the Beacon. You can get a yearly supportership for as like little as $50 a month. I mean, look, we're doing some great things at the Beacon. There's just continues to be amazing work there, and we need to build this out as one of our tools, organizational tools, and necessary tools for democracy going forward in the next this next administration. Well, Cyril, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of watching of the inauguration, I think, on Monday. But who knows? I might tune in because I'm a sucker for punishment at times, I guess. But I was happy to see that we're going to have this Arctic cold blast kind of dipping down into the DC area for Monday. So evil is cold after all. So,
yeah. So, well, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. And we'll talk next week.
Yeah, you got it. Hey, everybody, have yourself an awesome weekend. We got some more snow. We had some snow yesterday. We got some more snow that's coming on Sunday. I can't believe it. And then we've got some record cold that's going to be coming into the area. Happy, crazy climate change culture, everybody. This is what we live in now. But for now, I'm going to wish you all a super weekend. Play it safe out there. And I'm going to be celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday on Monday and not the kind of whatever the next Caesar. So take it easy, everybody. Have a super weekend. And we're out of here. This has been the Friday News Lunch, Bucks County Beacon. See ya!